Wednesday the 18th of January 1995. On the train last night I met a couple of guys from Maine. One of them corrected me that I wasn't going to La Junta, but La Junta, because the Spanish pronounced J's with an H sound. They got very drunk on the train. At breakfast I overheard a lady complaining about their drunken behaviour, as apparently one of them had thrown up in the carriage. Thursday the 19th of January. It's snowing in Kansas City. The snow is drifting through the carriage window and settling in my shoes, and I wonder when we will reach La Junta and whether I'll get cold feet or a suntan. As on these journeys crisscrossing America, I travel through so many different climate belts, and travelling long distances I never know what it's going to be like when I get off the train. Should I have packed a jumper? Should I have worn a t-shirt? I've had 2 sleepless nights on the train. There's a giant man a few seats up with a huge beard, and his face was glowing in the moonlight. Somehow he really put me on edge, and it was really unnerving trying to sleep. And the next morning, as an announcement came over the loudspeakers, the giant man started chanting, "Cut the gab, cut the gab, cut the gab. Disorderly conduct, you are discharged from the railroad services. Rebellion is a sign of witchcraft. Do not say anything against the Lord." And then he took out a Bible and started reading, laughing hysterically until he finally got off the train at Lamar, Colorado. As the train pulled away and I looked down out of the window at the large bearded man as he picked up his pack, our eyes met in a chilling moment as he stuck his 2 fingers up at me. It occurred to me later that on occasion his voice sounded similar to that of Elvis Presley, and I imagined the man without his great beard, and perhaps it was the king. Quickly, phone the Weekly World News. Elvis Presley spotted at Lamar, Colorado. La Junta was a dot on a map, and I really had no idea what to expect. And so with no expectations, I climbed down the steps to the platform and watched the train disappear like a white cloud blown by the wind across the horizon. As I walked, there was snow in the shadows and footprints left behind like cutouts. I went to the supermarket and chatted to a friendly checkout girl. She had half her front tooth missing. I asked what there was to see in this town, and this question surprised her and stumped her for a while, saying that tourists are very few and far between. And so she called a colleague, and between them they decided the biggest tourist attraction was the Indian Museum. So that's where I went. And I was really glad that I did, because it was full of excellent crafts and paintings. I enjoyed looking at the decorated pottery and wooden carvings, Hopi kachinas carved from the roots of cottonwood, wooden dolls made in the shape of bird spirits. The spirits are like the air, and the nearest thing to the air are birds. There are literally hundreds of different kachina spirits, all with their own distinctive features. There was a large hall in the museum where Indian tribal dancing would happen, but not today, of course. I sketched the artifacts and found much to be inspired by, thinking I might like to have a go at carving my own kachina. Later on I passed a sign for a bookshop and went in, and what was unusual about this bookshop was that it was someone's house, filled from ceiling to floor. Bookcases all round every room. Everything, even the kitchen sink, was full of books. The chairs on the edges of the stairs and the window sills piled up. Blue curtains were closed in all the rooms, so it was quite dark inside, and there was a sign at the bottom of the stairs that just said, "Yell upstairs," in capital letters. It was like someone's book collection had got out of hand, and then in a desperate attempt to free up some space, they'd opened their house up to the public. There was a guy reading downstairs, and I asked him what the prices were, and he replied, "If you show me a book I can tell you, but I can't go lower than $1, as him upstairs," he gestures by lifting his head, "gets annoyed." That night on the train there was an atmosphere of panic. Personal property had been going missing. A bag, some clothes, a child's doll. How low can you go? The thief was on the train, and my rucksack was all alone downstairs. I thought about it and then decided there was nothing in the rucksack of any great value, so I wasn't really that worried. The next morning I went downstairs to brush my teeth, only to discover that my rucksack had been opened and the contents were strewn about the luggage rack. My bread was gone! I saw a porter, and then I realised. Also the personal stereo with the pink game was gone too! Oh no, and that had been a leaving present. He said, "Hold on, calm down. Let me take your address and details." A personal stereo? What make was it? I thought for a moment. Morphy Richards. What's that? Some kind of English make? Well, I said you can recognise it easily as it's got a pink game on the front, and every time you pick it up this nasty digital music starts. To be honest, the stereo had been a bit of a bugbear the whole trip, and every time you picked up your bag the thing would go off and start its manic tune. The fact that this item had been taken was possibly a blessing in disguise, but the bread was my food for the day, and I'd quite like it back. The porter didn't seem too worried about this, but I did tell him that a sure way to catch the criminal would be to go around kicking everyone's bag and wait for the tune to start up. I don't really mind if they keep the game, but I do want my bread back. As I got off the train at Kansas City, I saw the FBI men going on board with dogs, and as I sat at the station I started laughing. Those crooks had done me a real favour. It was then, when I began to sort out the stuff in my bag, I discovered the bread was actually still there, squashed so small at the bottom I hadn't even noticed. I smiled and then felt somewhat guilty about making such a fuss about a loaf of bread.